Hello everyone, Miss Carter here, and I'm so glad that you've joined us again for some ACT prep. As you know, this year both of your schools, the St. John's High School and the Round Valley High School, are both offering their ACT test on Tuesday, April 4th. So we spent some of February and all of March getting ready for our ACT test. This year, both schools will be offering the essay portion of the test, which is excellent. So we'll be preparing for that as well. Before we jump into this reading video to get you kind of ready for that section, I hope that you've had a chance to look at our ACT overview video, just kind of covering the basic setup of the test, how long the entire test takes, when you get a break, why to bring a digital watch, what type of digital watch to bring, and other things to kind of get you ready for test day. After that, I hope you've had a chance to review our English prep video. This is the part of the test where you'll feel like you have the most time, so we talk about that a little bit, and then do a lot of grammar and punctuation review just to kind of get you ready for that part of the test and review some of the things that maybe we haven't looked at for quite a while. After that, we had a math prep video that I hope you've had a chance to look at as well. We kind of just cover why you can't take 1 minute per question on the math test. We look at the different types of math questions that you'll be working through on the math test. The majority of which are, of course, algebra and geometry, and then a few trigonometry questions. And we talk about how to tackle those and how to save yourself time on that part of the test. And today we'll be looking at the reading portion of the test. So let's just go ahead and jump into that really quick. Like I've said a few times, I really hope that you have a chance to join us at the Loft or the Lodge. They have some great manuals there to help you get ready, full of actual retired ACT tests to give you a very authentic flavor for what sorts of questions you'll be facing. And then, of course, each test does tell you at the beginning how much time you have, so you can be setting a timer for yourself, even if you're doing the practice on your own. And I am leaving bubble sheets at both of those facilities for you to use. And of course, always let me know if there's anything else that you need or any questions that you have that I might be able to help you with. But to jump into the ACT reading, and just to let you know, this video will be shorter than some of our other videos because in person, once we kind of get through this prep, we do quite a bit of practicing. We go through some of the passages together to kind of get used to looking for all of those key phrases and stuff that the ACT will be asking us about. So I hope that you can get together with us for some of those. And then also because these two sections of the test are shorter and it just gives us a little more time to work with, we do take quite a few practice tests to really mimic the timing of the test to let you know how rushed these two sections feel, reading and science. All right, there's really no replacement for being a great reader. The ACT is really testing you to see if you can do college level reading, especially first, second year college level reading. That's what they kind of expect you to do, of course, whenever you get out of high school. And one of the ways to be a really great reader is, of course, to read frequently and to read challenging texts. We don't always choose challenging texts when we're picking reading material for ourselves. A lot of times, and of course I do this as well, we gravitate toward reading that we really enjoy. However, if you're trying to step up your reading game, you're really going to want to read challenging things that maybe you wouldn't always choose for yourself. Because, of course, when you get to college, they'll be having you read a wide variety of topics and subjects, and those aren't always ones that you would choose for yourself, and you're going to be expected to engage with those really challenging texts on the page, of course, and then with your professors and fellow students. So as you are doing this reading and you're starting to pick up more reading material, carry it around with you, always have something in your backpack to read, make these 4 questions a habit. What's the main topic? What is this article discussing? That should be fairly simple to arrive at. Number 2, what does the article say about the topic? What are some of the key facts or major points that you can pick up about this topic that's being discussed? Number 3, what or where are the major shifts and transitions in the topic? When does X happen? What triggered Y? Where does the tone of the article change? That type of thing. And then finally, what's the main message, idea, or theme of the topic? And of course, in our English classes, we get used to being grilled on the theme of things all the time, but there will always be some kind of perspective in any kind of reading that you do, no matter how informational it is. And to be able to pick up on that message, idea, theme, perspective, and point of view is really important. Okay, the reading and science portions of the test are going to be the two multiple choice sections where you feel most rushed for time. On both of these, you only have 35 minutes while you have 40 questions to tackle. So we really have to practice getting efficient at answering these questions and saving ourselves a little bit of time as we go along. All right, the passages in the reading section of the test, anyway, always appear in the same order. The number one passage will always be prose fiction. This is any kind of fiction that you're used to reading. Of course, again, in your English classes, if you're reading a story and it is, as a kid, what you would call make believe or something, a lot of times this is your prose fiction. Number two, social science passage. We might be talking about some kind of biography or geography, what they might refer to as a soft science in your classes. Number three, we'll be talking about a humanities topic. A lot of times this takes the format of a memoir or sort of personal essay, or they might be discussing something like art, dance, or film, something like that. Number four will be a natural science like astronomy, biology, chemistry, or your hard science. One of these four will always be a dual passage. In other words, they will be asking you to compare passage A and B in there and look for the similarities and differences in those two perspectives. If you prefer reading fiction, then I would always say read passages 1 and 3 first, since those will be the ones that you are quickest at. You can save yourself a little bit of time by reading through those and answering them first. However, if you are more of a scientific minded person, then you're going to want to read sections 2 and 4 first, and then you can save yourself a little bit of time for sections 1 and 3, which may not be your favorite. You don't always have to tackle the passages in order. You can tackle them in whatever order you prefer. And so 1 and 3 if you like fiction, and 2 and 4 if you are more of a science brain. All right, what makes the ACT reading section difficult? Of course, we've already talked about the time limit on there. That really does make it hard. Good readers are used to taking their time to read. Of course, that's how we are taught to read, and that's what we're going to want to be doing in college. Although we will have a lot of reading material to get through, we're going to want to engage with those texts deeply, which really takes quite a bit of time. So you're not going to be able to read on the ACT reading section of the test like you would for any other kind of school assignment. That's why I really encourage you on this reading portion of the test to read these passages in your own order. Like I said before, 1 and 3 if you really like fiction, and 2 and 4 if you gravitate toward more factual or informational texts. Maybe look for the passages that have smaller paragraphs. The questions that have a lot of line references are great because you can just jump to the line that they're referencing and usually answer the question right away. And then always be on the lookout for those short answers. As we discussed in the English prep section of these videos, ACT really does prefer short. All right, so how are we going to actually tackle the reading? If we don't have time to read every single word and engage with it deeply, how are we going to do it? Well, we're going to do something called passage glancing. You're going to take 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes maximum to read the passage. And this is how you're going to do it. You're going to read entirely the first paragraph as quickly as you can. Then you're going to read the first and last sentence of all of the paragraphs until you get to the last one, and you're going to read all of that last paragraph. That is passage glancing. Now, I've had a lot of students that are actually fast enough to do this passage glance, but still skim all of the lines in the intervening paragraphs. And I do really recommend that if you are able to read that way. Again, this is another reason to come in and practice the reading section as often as you can at the loft or the lodge, because you'll really get a feel for how you tackle the reading sections best. All right, then as you go through this, this is what the ACT is a little bit obsessed with on the reading part of the test. Relationships, emotions, and events. That's what you're going to be keying into as you read all of these passages. All four of them will have these elements in them, and they will be asking you questions about these. So let's dig a little deeper into what we mean by those. As far as relationships go in the passages, even the factual passages, we're going to be looking at things that are happening between people, maybe historical figures, or people and objects, people in nature, people in time, objects in time, any kind of things that we can see coming together kind of in a Venn diagram sort of way. Next, we're going to ask ourselves, what emotions do we see at play here? What emotions are implied? In other words, what are they not what emotions are being discussed that maybe aren't explicitly in the text, but we can pick up on from the tone or maybe some of the word choices of the writer. What's the narrator's point of view? What's causing the emotions that we're actually looking at? And finally, are they resolved? Is there any kind of change in these emotions? Do you see a person go from maybe dark and brooding to maybe happy and lighter by the end? And if so, what triggered this change? And then finally, we're going to be looking at the events in the passages. What actually happened and what order did they happen in case we jump around in time? What started X, Y, or Z, and how did those influence each other? All right. Like I said in the English part of the prep, always read the title of the passage to set your brain up. Your brain loves to know what's going on. And so often, if we just take a minute to look at the title, it will kind of key us into what we're looking for. So our mind isn't having to search around about what is this topic? What is this person even talking about? A lot of times there will be clues in the title. So take just a second to look for those. And then you're going to look for lead words in the questions, nouns, phrases, and verbs that you can peek at and then look for in the actual passage itself. Just to let you know, on 99.9% of the ACT questions for the reading passages, you're going to be able to actually find a line that has that in it. So then you're going to know exactly what the right answer is. So always try to find those line references just for yourself so you're sure that you're right. All right. Always look for the accept, least, and not questions on the reading sections. These will take you a little bit more time. And they can be later or never questions, especially if you're taking a paper test. You can always just kind of circle those and go back to it later. However you tackle it, always leave it for the last question on that section because by the time you get to answering it, your mind has probably and your eyes have scanned the entire text by that time. By that time, you've probably answered 8, 9, or 10 questions on it. And so you're going to know the answer to the accept, least, or not question. Again, as you look for that answer, you can always cross off items that are mentioned in the passage, and then you should be able to arrive at what's left. All right, don't forget that you can always be adaptable and flexible. If the passage glancing doesn't really work for you, or you feel like you're missing too much key information by just reading the first and last sentences of those intervening paragraphs, then ask yourself a few questions. Would I have a little bit more information as I start to get to the questions if I skim the intervening paragraphs even just a little bit? Don't be embarrassed to use your finger to read. Research has shown that if we use our fingers on tests to actually kind of follow line by line, we read at a much quicker clip. So just practice that a little bit. It might help you gain a little bit of time. Again, once you practice this a few times, you're going to have a system that works for you. That's why it's so important to come in and actually tackle these with the time set up so that you only give yourself that 35 minutes. And then give yourself a 2-minute warning to review the accept, least, or not questions and any other later questions that you might have left behind. Again, don't read like a good student. Take 2 to 3 minutes max for each one of these. And don't forget to look for the relationships, emotions, and events. So if you were in class with us, we would start taking apart some of these reading passages. First of all, we would time ourselves to see if we could cover an entire passage in 2.5 to 3 minutes and have all of the reading part done. And then we would go through each question together and practice actually finding those line references to answer each question so that we would know exactly where that answer was and that we were correct before we filled in that bubble. We would ask ourselves what the relationships, emotions, and events were in the passage, what we could actually tackle. We would practice kind of doing that in the background so that we aren't having to look at each and every question and answer super specifically, but just kind of skimming it, running through it in the back of our mind, and knowing those relationships, emotions, and events by the time we get to the end of the passage. And then that would leave us with about 6 minutes to answer the 10 questions for that passage. You need to be able to do each passage in about 8 to 8.5 minutes. And if you were with us in person, we would be working on test 4, which starts on page 632. This is the time breakdown. So if you want to take a picture of this slide and then go ahead and set yourself a 35-minute timer for this test, this is how you should be tackling it as far as the 8.5 minutes go for each section. No matter what order you read it in, the first passage, you should always be done reading it when you have about 26.5 minutes left. And then the second passage that you read, you need to be finished by the time that your timer says you have about 18 minutes left. Passage 3, again, whatever order, finish by about the 9.5 minute mark. And then passage 4, leave yourself about 1 minute at the end of that to go back and review or double check anything that you have. So I hope this has been helpful to you. Again, there's really no replacement for coming in and practicing, setting the 35-minute timer, and taking a couple of these tests. We are working on test 4 right now, but tomorrow we'll actually be taking all of tests 2 and 3 since they're just 35 minutes, and then we'll be grading them to get together and then going through those ACT scale scores that you can find for each practice test at the end of the book to see how much better we're getting on our composite score every time. All right, I hope to see you at the Lofter Lodge soon. Good luck on the reading section of your ACT test.